services sector, and I was quite intrigued that there are different ways of putting it together. Obviously, we're all familiar with primary industries, second industries, which is manufacturing, and tertiary, which is services. In some jurisdictions, they include government work as part of services sector. But obviously, I think for the sake of today, we won't include that. But that's actually quite an important chunk, especially for Malaysia, because, as we all know, there's a huge amount of the people are employed by government. So I think that's something that we should remember while we're talking about female participation in the services sector. But it represents some great opportunities, and I'm sure you're all aware. So if you look I was looking in the US, for example, the employment rate of women in the services sector doubled from about 35% in 1945 to 77% at the end of the 20th century. That's huge. And so, I think in the US, it's 70% of the economy now. And the women participation in that sector is almost 2/3. I'm seeing some stats. So that's staggering number. And there has been an amazing change. And that same story is echoed in European economies as well, including the UK. So that's quite interesting, right? And so saying, so kind of what's happened. And really, if you look at it, this has driven, obviously, greater empowerment for women. There's obviously much more to go, and really means that they've had much better wage inflation and more, I guess, jobs that are more sustainable and more secure in the nature of it. Now, I know we'll touch on a little bit. Pandemic has obviously skewed that a little bit, but I don't. Hopefully, it's not a permanent change. But so it also says that actually what's happened then is, what's happened to the men then. So apparently the men are more involved in the primary and secondary industries, and if you look at that, actually the rate of employment of men, or the number of man hours or men's hours put in that, has dropped significantly. So there's also a kind of change in that dynamic. So there's less intensive use of brawn skills, they call it, in the production of goods, and so that's again skewed the numbers, and of course there's less of women being involved in housework because there's more childcare, etc. available, and that's also allowed for more women to get employed and seek change. And I think my own experience, all of us working for multinationals, we all have had significant programs trying to develop greater participation of women, and insurance industry in a legacy perspective was actually quite bad, but I can tell you that it's improved a lot. So specific programs to develop women leaders, ensuring when we're recruiting, we have greater diversity in terms of who's on the short list, and this has been going on for quite a number of years. And the good thing is you'll see boards also, right? We have greater participation of women on boards. We have a lady chairman, and it's great. It reflects greater diversity of thought, and the decision making is I think a much more balanced one. And we certainly have seen the benefits and embraced that. So I think it's important that I don't think there should be anyone that is questioning kind of what's happened. I think it's a great shift. But of course, we're all aware that pandemic has affected women in general, because unfortunately some of those sectors are the ones that employ a greater percentage. Tourism is a no-brainer, right? And hospitality, obviously. Hopefully we're at the tail end of this pandemic and things start returning back to some normality. The other big thing that's happened, obviously, with pandemic is the ability to work from home. And we were all skeptical at the beginning whether this was going to work. Now it has its issues, right? There's no doubt about that, but it has worked a lot better than we expected. I think we're all more comfortable with going forward a balanced approach. And of course, specific jobs are different, right? Some jobs do require people to be in the office for technical reasons. Others are more flexible. And I think it requires, the greater that we share all our experiences, I think the easier it is for all of us to move forward and find some sort of equilibrium so that, again, we have that ability to balance out the employer's needs and the employees' needs. And there are two sides of the story also when it comes to women in employment in Malaysia, right? So we have some that are very happy working from home. We have others that are dying to get back to the office because childcare and everything else is driving them nuts, as it would drive all of us nuts. And because it's been too long, right? Obviously, that's very tough, and it's not good for the kids' education as well. There was another interesting thing that I saw, which was about, I think the Economist, let me try and find it, did an article on the role of trade in promoting women's equality. So again, it said, new trends in global trade, especially the rise in services, global value chains, they call it. That's an important term. And the digital economy are opening out important economic opportunities for women. And so what they're saying is basically it expands women's access to skills and education. But what they say is that there should be reforms in trade policy that reduce discrimination against women, which I thought was quite interesting. And what it meant was, it's not that governments specifically design policies against women, but for some reason, a lot of the goods and services that women, I guess, spend a greater proportion of their income on, somehow typically get a higher tax rate or a different, the way the government looks at it. So that's something interesting that they found that, and obviously something I've not been aware of. So that's something that, I guess we need to look at. But it said exporters typically employ more women, right? So in developing countries, women make up 33% of the workforce of exporting firms, compared with just 24% of non-exporting firms. And women who are employed in these sectors tend to be more formally employed and have better benefits, training, and security. So I think that's where AmCham, definitely we must be in that category. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. If you look at where the West is, developed nations, look at where we are today, and the opportunities that lie ahead, I think these are fantastic opportunities. But if you look at it still, if you take the whole world as in totality, you still have fewer than 1 in 2 women who are working, right? That's a statistic that is quite scary. Amongst those who do work, 80% occupy medium and low skilled jobs. Women are also overrepresented in the informal sector, with up to 90% of women informally employed in sub-Saharan Africa. Obviously, that is an extreme situation. And just 3% of female employees in low-income countries are skilled workers. So massive opportunities, I think, still going forward. I think we've achieved a lot, but at least we're cognizant of what's going forward. So I kind of wanted to stop there because I think, I've got this great panel of speakers and guests and everyone. Let's get the dialogue going. So anyway, once again, welcome all of you, and I hope you enjoy today's session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, panelists and participants. Thank you very much for dialing in for our session today, entitled Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, Its Gains and Challenges at Workplace. And, we've got a great suite of speakers today. Welcome, panelists. Perhaps let's start getting into the conversation. So, as I've mentioned, we have got a remarkable suite of panelists today. Perhaps it's interesting to hear some of their observations. So panelists, let's start with, what are some of the observations you have on the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion at workplace, and how organizations have gained or perhaps even thrive on it? Perhaps we can start with Sam.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is well and in good health. So I'm going to steal a quote from our CEO, and that's basically that the data is very clear. Organization with women in the leadership outperform organizations who don't. And looking at that from a wider perspective, organizations that are purposely working towards inclusion are shifting the needle and are growing at a faster rate than the rest of the market. And this has been very much central to our own organization, where at a global level, we've made a commitment that our global leadership team the females will constitute 50% of our global leadership team by 2025. And I'm happy to say that in Malaysia, we're already ahead of this target where 5 out of our 8 senior leaders are female. So to provide the context, it's no longer a nice to have, it's a business imperative because of the value that women bring to the workplace, the ability to be able to adapt to various environments, and also to address some of the gaps in the talent shortage right across the world. Organizations have to leverage this talent across their organizations.
Thank you, Sam. We'll just build on from there. Perhaps we have Swati to say something about her observations.
Thank you, Sugana. So, for us, I would probably echo what Sam was saying that, of course, the advantages of having women employees in leadership roles and in the organization are actually precisely known to everybody. But I do want to begin by the fact that our focus at Philip Morris on diversity is more on diversity of thought, So I think the most important thing over here is that how do we achieve the diversity of thought is through gender diversity, nationality, race, age, and we focus on all of it. And I think what the diversity of thought and specifically focusing on our women employees, is the fact that it brings two things. First thing on inclusion, there is a level of confidence that it helps to instill into our employees, that they have a forum where they can speak their mind openly. They have the psychological safety that, their views and opinions will not be discarded and will be considered. And that all leads to the advantage for the organization, which we have seen in the form of innovation and productivity, So I think it's not just only advantageous for an organization to really have diversity and inclusion, but I think it also plays a role in providing that level of comfort and confidence to the employees to be a part of this organization. And that's where really our focus is towards providing a very safe environment for not just our women employees, but a diverse workforce to be able to speak their mind and share their opinions. So that's what really inclusion does for us at our organization.
Fantastic, Swati. Well said about the environment. Let's hear from Danielle. Any thoughts, Danielle? What are some of your observations?
Yeah, thank you so much. So similarly, at BMW Group in Malaysia, we do have more than 50% of our management team is actually female. So I have to say that this is really impressive for us. And given that in the BMW Group, whether it be the automotive organization or the financial services organization, typically it's a male dominant place. And so to leap through those bounds, I would have to say is quite impressive as an organization. And then for me, being in Malaysia for 1 year, coming in place a replacement of a man, I would have to say it gives me such a great opportunity to sort of lead that through within my team as well. I can only really echo here what Swati was saying, which is within the group, however, we don't just choose people because they are female, to come into those roles. You must have the right product knowledge, you must have the right skill set to come in. But where we find teams of people that haven't got that diversity factor, whether it be gender, race, any kind of cultural background or experience, we do try and shift the needle there. We do want to make that more of an opportunity for creativity and innovation. And another point I'd like to make is rather around helping the minorities have a voice. So whether it be male, female, religion or race, it's about giving people the space, the safety to have their voice and to speak their mind. And that's what we really look for in our organization, is to give those people, our people, that opportunity to add the value. Yeah.
Thank you, Danielle. And obviously, Dave, next yourself.
Sure. Yeah, I'll try not to repeat anything, right? But when we talk about getting increased performance, right, from a more diverse workforce and more women in the workforce, as an engineer, I always want to know how, right? So where do we see that? We see that a more diverse workforce brings in better problem solving, right? And that's really through a more comprehensive creativity, right? So more views, more approaches, more lines of thought, approaching things from different angles, right? So how do we drive better performance with a more diverse workforce? That's critical to it. And I think the other thing, as we all are in a massive global talent shortage, right? across the world, there are not enough people to fill the roles that we have as growing multinationals. Building a broader range of talent is also important, right? So how do we pull in, and this is building on Anthony's great comments in the beginning, how do we build in growth on segments of the population that maybe are not currently working, right? So there's another angle of performance gains. Thanks.
All right, great. Now that we have heard, the diverse views that our panelists have, displayed to us today, what we will do next is go through a little bit deeper into the conversation. So my next question is a little bit on the challenges, particularly on the women workforce. So according to PwC Women in Work 2022 report, the pandemic has set back the progress of gender equality for women by at least 2 years. And the data also shows that some 4.3 million more women became unemployed and a further 3.2 million left the workforce. And this is between 2019 to 2020. Now, also building on Anthony's comment, right, as organizations start rebuilding, start returning back to work, and as we embrace the future of work as well, what are some of the things or additional initiatives that organizations could do to accelerate the participation of women at work? Perhaps we can have Danielle a little bit on your thoughts about that.
Yeah, thank you. I love this topic, actually. I'm quite passionate about this one because I've seen it happen even within my team in Malaysia. A lot of the women have gone back into those traditional stereotypical roles, not because they have to, but because it's in their nature to take care of family, to feed children, to take care of sick family members and so on. So from my perspective, I feel so passionate to bring people back and get them into those hunger, to progress their careers. So maybe I'll talk a little bit about how I'm doing that today. First and foremost, it's about making flexible hours really the norm. So in the last 2 years, if you rewind, we never thought we could be an organization that is working virtually and still succeeding. And yet we are. So I think the point is we don't need people to even live in Kuala Lumpur, even within, let's say, the hub of the city. We can have people that are in the outstations and still doing their job perfectly fine. So letting that be known, especially to our females within the organization. We also, from my perspective, is tapping women on the shoulders where I feel there's an opportunity based upon their skills. So often women are a little bit in the sidelines, not having the confidence when they see a position description to say, I only have 70% of what they're asking for. If you compare this traditionally to a man, they'll say, I've got 70%, I'm going for that job. And so here it's about really tapping the shoulder of our female colleagues and saying, we can see you succeeding in this role. Have you thought about applying? So it's taking that extra step, to support the growth and development. Another topic for me is a little bit about the going above and beyond by providing feedback to our females. So when we're in meetings and often something said and maybe taken or understood in a very different way, it's about providing that feedback consistently to our team members, whether in our teams or in others. So as a female, I would take the opportunity to say, hey, did you understand how that came across, or coach and guide in that way to help the future development of those people. I would also like to just say genuinely champion women because they do bring such a different skill set and understanding, especially for leadership roles. So a lot of the time we are criticized for promoting women into leadership roles. Why do we do that? And it's really fundamental that the skills, the soft skills that women bring to the organization sometimes are very hard to measure. But what we find is in leadership, in taking care of a team, bringing them to their best. It's about effective communication. It's about empathy, self-awareness, those things that come naturally to women. They are things that we see have an effect on our bottom line, which is a little bit intangible. But if you really work through that, I think you can find the link there.
Fantastic. I mean, those are certainly great thoughts, Danielle. What I will do next is try to build on your thoughts, right? Perhaps Dave, is there some additional views you have?
I mean, I think Danielle covered a broad range of it there, right? But if you look at the impacts of the pandemic specifically, in the beginning, it was a shock and it pushed a lot of people out of the workforce, right? And I believe some of that grew out of just what happened, but some of that also grew out of lack of flexibility on the behalf of employers, right? So smart employers that want to survive. The silver lining of the pandemic is in 2 years, we figured out how to be a lot more flexible, right? And I think that is key in being able to broaden our workforce. And so, one of the good things that's come out of it is, we sort of figured out the work from home or hybrid work thing, right? I'd say 2 years ago, you'd get more people that would say, no, it couldn't work, right? So the benefit of that is that companies have figured that out. Companies that want to survive and compete are going to absolutely have to build flexibility and to attract a diverse workforce. Thanks.
Fantastic. And there's just so many hybrid working models being rolled out these days. I can see organizations are just going ahead with it and then, kind of learning and adapting from that as well. And it's useful for and it's useful to hear some of the feedback that comes, right, and see how they can build that insights to make it work. So it's a pivot moment for many of the organizations. That's a great comment. Anyone else wants to add to this thoughts on as we return back to work, embrace future of work, what additional initiatives we can do to accelerate the participation of women?
Well, I thought one of the...
Sorry,
Sam. Go ahead, Swati.
Thank you. So if I could just add, because we as an employer, the good part was that in Philip Morris, we actually introduced 4.5-day work week in 2019. So we've actually been the first organization in Malaysia to introduce 4.5-day work week. So that really helped us because when people were coming back, we didn't have to really introduce flex hours or stuff like that because we already had that since 2019. But over and above that, what we've done specifically for our women employees, very recently, we've had cases where, as Daniele was saying, that women somehow tend to want to go back to that protecting the family. And over the last 2 years, that has they've been able to spend a lot of time with the family, which has also kind of led to a little bit of a guilt feeling somewhere that, were we not spending enough time with our family members? So for some of the people who have actually approached us, some of our women employees, we've given the flexibility of working part-time, So we've actually started offering 3-day work week if somebody's interested, as well as looking at job sharing as an option. But this is, of course, not something that we've put as a policy, but if women come to us and they want that, we are changing our job structures to accommodate that. So that's the first thing, which is in addition to all the other flexible stuff that we are providing. The second thing that I want to point out is around systemic changes, we looked at our medical insurance and all our medical policies to make it more conducive for, God forbid, if there is something like this in the future. We were calling people back, and some of our women employees have young children who are not vaccinated, So we, again, last year itself, middle of the pandemic, we were the first company that introduced a COVID insurance cover. We were very worried for our employees. We wanted to bring them back to work. But how do you provide them that mental peace, that they have the coverage that is really required? So we relooked at all our medical policies and to make sure we started including things like traditional Chinese medicine. We have started including, mental health and therapy into our policies. We are introducing a mental health day off to make sure that, people have that ability when they are not able to get a medical certificate, but to be able to call it a sick day and just be at home when they're not feeling up to it. So I think these things, the systemic changes and some bit of, tweaking how we look at our jobs and how we can offer more flexibility than just core hours and the 4.5-day work week that we were doing. These two systemic changes have helped us to bring back our women employees back to work in a better manner, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you, Swati, for having some trailblazing moments in Malaysia. I think you're right. 4.5 days, I've not heard of it yet. I know a lot of organizations are talking about it. Moving into 4 days, there's some small teams that's exploring that thoughts as well. But thank you for the breakthrough. Sam, you wanted to add something, Sam. Over to you.
Yeah, it's building on what Swati has said, and that's a significant shift within organizations to more an outcome perspective rather than presenteeism. In the past, it was all about people clocking in terms of the number of hours. There's a lot more focus in terms of what are we actually going to be delivering. So that means the way to be able to get work done is much, much more flexible than we've ever seen, whether it's part-time, whether it's away from the office, or even a dispersed workforce where you could be completely out of the country. So this was really important. The other thing, as Anthony mentioned right at the beginning, there were significant industries that were impacted in terms of the pandemic, and that's led to a number of women exiting the workforce. Now, that in itself is an opportunity for employers who are prepared to look at transferable skills and the ability of the individual to learn and their keenness to get back to work. And I think that's something that should not be underestimated, because again, Danielle talked about the 70%. In many cases, there are enough core competencies and skills that could be redirected to different industries, different job roles, which means that you're going to expand your choices of talent within the organization while looking at, diversifying your workforce. And one last thing, unless leadership owns it, it doesn't happen. So you've got to measure it. You've got to make sure that this is a focus. And again, it's not because it's a tick the box or it's a global, nice thing to do. This is a business imperative that organizations need to leverage. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Sam, that's a great siege to my next question, which is about leadership. You spoke about it's very important that leadership in organizations, they own it, which I completely agree. And I think Anthony and the panelists will agree as well. While we also see a lot of, personal accountabilities that individuals need to take as well in making this transition, right? So building on leadership itself, it is critical that we must have sufficient women representation at the leadership roles, right? And Danielle spoke about it as well. And this is very important, as many of you have said, that it's important to improve efficiencies when you have diverse leadership team in place that includes women as well. It sparks innovation. It helps solve complex problems. So we know all that, and those are the observations we have seen and researches that we have read about. So what are some of the initiatives, panelists, you think that the organizations in Malaysia could do to further advocate women at leadership level? So perhaps we will start with, we can have Dave to start it off, and then the rest can jump in as well.
Sure, yeah, I'll speak from the Boston Scientific perspective in terms of what we do here. And I think, I'm, in a company that's technology driven, right? So we generally get what we measure, whether we're individuals or companies, right? So one of the most powerful things I've seen and I'm a huge fan of is at the personal level, I statements in our own objectives, right? So in our written objectives for the year, an I statement where I would say my I statement about how I am going to drive DEI, participation of women in the workforce, et cetera, is something that I commit to. Now, once I put that on paper, then mentally I will deliver that, right? I will drive to deliver what I commit to. So if you take that up to the organizational level globally, Boston Scientific, in our annual performance report, which you can go online and pull down, we commit our targets for everything across the ESG spectrum, the DEI work, everything from an environmental perspective, all the supplier activities, et cetera. So as a company, we put those in writing, and then we report every year on how we're doing against those targets. So, organizations want to do nothing more than meet the targets that are laid out for them. And I think that's extremely powerful, just saying this is what we're going to do. And I think for companies in Malaysia, that's really important. In the middle there, one of the other powerful tools is sponsorship, right? So rather than mentoring people to develop them, we've moved to more of a sponsorship type activity, right? Where we are sponsoring employees to lead them through their career growth and career development. So my role as a sponsor for my sponsee is that I am helping her develop her career, get where she wants to go, have her name in the roster for specific roles that she wants to interview for, et cetera. So it's a very powerful way to drive sort of action versus the passive piece of kind of mentoring people, right? So I think that's another powerful tool. So I statements, sponsorship, and then at the corporate level, just putting your goals out there for everyone to read, because then you know you will drive to them.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
Fantastic. And it seems like you expressively, explicitly express it across the organization as well, because that's what I'm also seeing that you're talking about, because many organizations, they have it as part of the objectives of, some call it KPI, but what I'm hearing from you is you explicitly communicate that KPI to the rest of the organization as well, and coming from leaders like you, and
right.
Mm.
Exactly. And we communicated publicly, right? So it's on the website. It's for everyone, whether you're Wall Street or wherever, you pull down any of our reports, you'll see it. And are we perfect, right? Are we perfect at the local level? Are we perfect at the global level? Maybe not every year, but it drives progress towards goals, right? I mean, the last 2 years have been a bit of a discontinuity, as everybody knows, but still having those objectives out.
I think we're losing Dave a little bit. Yeah.
There may be noise. Okay, sorry. I'll stop there.
We lost you for a couple of seconds, but no worries. We could figure out your passion.
All right. Sorry about that.
No worries at all. So anyone else wants to add in? Danielle, perhaps anything to add to that space?
When I was thinking about the topic that we're discussing today, one thing that came to mind from a different employer that I think is actually something that I would like to implement within the BMW group that comes to mind, which is creating a group in a workplace where we have it run by, let's say, senior female leaders. And I think it's okay if I share the name, because I worked at GE Money for about 8 years. It was my first career out of university. And we had a fantastic women's network. It was actually called GE Women's Network. This is when I was in my home country of Australia. And what it was about these senior women creating a lunch and learn, once every couple of months, once a quarter, whatever the frequency may be. But it's an opportunity where you have these women come up and share their experiences, their stories, personally, their heartaches, their pains, and how they've had to really embrace change and stand strong in difficult situations. And I found when I was a part of these groups, I think this is what actually stirred me to be a very strong, independent woman in the workforce and not really conform to the natural male dominant environment. Yeah. So I find that by sharing these combating stories of stereotypical things, or championing women in the workplace, or really understanding what benefit our soft skills can have, just giving you that confidence of the advantages you bring, I feel that this is something that would really help women to feel more confident in their abilities. Yeah, so I think this is a takeaway that I'd like to really implement in the BMW group, in fact.
That will be a fabulous one, Danielle. I was with GE for 8 years, and GE Women's Network is a huge thing for GE, right? And I noticed one of the key things that GE does differently when it comes to the Women's Network is the year budgeting process, the annual budgeting process that we do for our businesses incorporates the budget for the Women's Network as well, right? Yeah. So they get to say that, guys, you know what, if this is what we want to do for the year and raise our women participation or enhance their career growth, this is the amount of money we need, right? And it's part of the budgeting process. So, yeah.
And maybe one more point on this, it wasn't just a group that was fostered only for females. So men could also join in if they would like to. So it wasn't just girls only, let's say.
It's yeah. Huge men allies in that group as well. That's good. That brought some great memories, Danielle. Left GE 2 years ago, but that brought great memories. So anyone wants to add in, Swati? I'm sure you're passionate about women and leadership.
Yes.
You like to add?
And I just realized I have a thing in common with you and Danielle. I worked with GE as well, my first company too, and 5 years, and I loved that organization, and the Women's Network was just fantastic. So lots of learnings, frankly, from that organization. Having said that, so I think there are two aspects of having more women in leadership position. So unlike some of my co-panelists here who have achieved their target of above 50% in their management team, we yet haven't. We are getting there. We are close to 50%, but we are not at 50% yet. But there are two things that are helping us overall worldwide in the organization. So the first one is something that is equal salary certification. So again, a few years back, we embarked on this journey and we said we wanted to really put the money where our mouth is and let our books open and our compensation open to PwC to audit us and tell us whether we were paying equitably for our men and women in their jobs, you know. And I think that has really helped us. We got the certification globally, including Malaysia, and we've just had a recertification audit as well. But I think very, very importantly, that kind of provides that safety net to women who are already a part of our company, as well as those that we are hoping to hire from outside, that, you know, they are going to be treated fairly when they're applying for a job and not, you know, have any kind of discrimination based on gender or you know, any other form of nationality, race, or anything of that sort. So we pay equitably for a job irrespective of gender. We are very, very clear on that, you know. So that has really helped us in our hiring efforts of women leadership because that provides them the safety net. The second thing is around promotions, you know, because I've seen one thing that, I mean, of course, we have the developmental programs and we have the networks and everything that provide opportunities to women. But I think what has also helped us in the last few years, we've started measuring our promotion efforts as well, you know, which we were not doing till 2021. Actually, we started last year from the beginning. We do now look at whether we have an equitable pool when we are looking to promote people, and we want to make sure that we have enough women employees who are targeted for promotions as well, because the growth from within should also not be stunted for women and should be equitably or equally spread across. So I think those are the two efforts from our side for hiring and for promotions, which are helping us to achieve that target of 50%. We are not there yet, you know.
Yep. And it all starts with that aspiration. Swati, I'm sure you will get there one day. It all starts with that aspiration and that dream. Sam, anything to add?
Well, I think one of the things that came frequently within our own internal employee surveys is the presence of female role models. Because typically in the past, it's been very much the CEO or the head of the organization has typically been a man. And we've seen significant engagement levels when you have a female role model that you can relate to, that you can speak to, that you can understand that they've gone through similar challenges to yourself. I think also it's the coaching element of it, because as much as organizations have to address that gender gap, I think some women have that maybe lack of confidence, maybe because of the past prejudices that they have endured, is that mindset that, you know, I'm not going to be able to get this. So it's about coaching them through that process. And at the end of the day, what organizations are looking for is the right person for the role, regardless of gender or persuasion. That's really what is going to drive growth for organizations. So, you know, more exposure to female leaders across our organization. And we're seeing a lot more of that happening. And again, that's a very positive thing to be able to encourage women in the workforce to come through and, you know, and achieve their aspirations and maybe push the boundaries of what they had thought that they were going to be able to achieve in the past.
Yes, thank you, Sam. Thank you very much. The past prejudices, that's a very interesting conversation, right, to further have, because we are all built by our past experiences and prejudices, and sometimes we carry that forward into the, you know, and build that barrier ourselves, right? So it's a very interesting topic, perhaps opportunity for another webinar on that topic as well. So moving on to the next question. This is something of very deep interest for many of us, right, as we embrace sustainability. So as we know, these days, organizations' obligations to transition to net zero is critical, and green jobs is a big part of it. And as we know, green jobs contribute to preserving and restoring environment, help improve efficiency in the use of energy, raw materials, limit emissions, minimize waste and pollution, protect and restore ecosystem, and support adaptation to the effects of climate change. Now, the survey data from PwC UK's Future of Government Survey 2021 shows that women are already feeling less prepared in taking green jobs as compared to men, right? That's an interesting observation. And this is primarily due to perceived lack of awareness of the opportunities available and perceived gap in skills. Now, this is a very, very interesting data point, right? As we are all in that space of sustainability and more to be done in that space as well. So what are some of the actions you think the organizations in Malaysia could take to ensure women are considered for these opportunities in green economy? So perhaps we start with Sam. Any thoughts on that?
Fantastic. I was raring to go to answer this one, and
I can see your gestures, Sam.
well,
Yours.
the reality is green industries are going to create jobs where there is going to be a shortage of talent in the first instance. So that goes across males and females. So that's a reality that we need to get more comfortable with, or perhaps less comfortable with. Essentially, what we're looking at is how we can identify skill sets that are adjacent or transferable from one industry to another. And this is going to be the most important thing that organizations do in terms of being able to replenish the talent pool. And again, when we talk about so many of the female workforce having come out of the workforce and looking to potentially return, this provides us with a great pool of talent, providing we can focus on their ability. The learnability is super important, because you may not have had previous experience in that area, or you may not even be qualified in that field, but you can learn. And this is the most significant factor in terms of development of people right across the board. And I think that's it. Smart organizations are already doing that. They're already investing in reskilling, coaching, repurposing, and providing people with the opportunity to try different roles within that new reality, to see how they can develop in that area. Now, again, this comes with no guarantees. Like anything else in any organization, you simply cannot afford not to invest, but it's certainly an opportunity to be able to leverage an existing workforce. And the key here is the ability of the individual, male or female, to be able to adapt to the new realities of the role and how they can get up to speed. And again, Danielle talked about 70%. In this particular case, maybe 50% is good enough, and over a period of time, because this is a sustainable industry. We're not looking at a quick fix. This is something that we're going to be looking at for long term. So again, it's about taking a long-term perspective on this to be able to develop talent, not just for now or the next couple of years, but for the future.
Very good, very good. Very good approach on that, right? Like being very realistic in working towards that aspiration. I thought that's a very powerful one. While a lot of organizations try to rush into it, what you're saying is be much more thoughtful and be reasonable. That's good, Sam. Anyone wants to add? Danielle, any thoughts on this? Technology is really, at the center of all this efforts around sustainability.
Yeah, sustainability is definitely something on the cards within the BMW Group for sure. And for those that are the car fiends, we've just launched 3 electric vehicles in Malaysia. So this is definitely not even the future, it is really the now. Yeah. I would echo a lot of what Sam says, to be honest with you, and I would not put it towards women. I would really put it towards male and women. Yeah, in this case, I would say the curiosity and the hunger to learn something new. If you go back many years ago when we were developing financial services or developing into leasing from owning cars, it was new, it was fresh, we didn't have the knowledge. So how did we end up evolving in this industry? It's really about, studying, doing the homework, networking with people that are in those fields. So perhaps not exactly, green in this way, but organizations that are investing in R&D or investing time and energy by hosting events, go to those events, start learning the language, the key terms, and the motivation that sits behind. So for me, it's a little bit I guess my suggestion would be for those that want to embark and jump into a new industry like Go Green, for example, it would really be the investment in time, energy, learning, be a sponge, follow, connect, go and buy a lot of coffees for people. Yeah. Ask them about their experiences and show them your attitude of hunger. Yeah. Because as Sam was saying, that transferable skill, maybe that 50% that you could put into a role, absolutely is going to be the way of the future for this one. So for me, treat it like a new project. That's how I would see it.
Okay. I would like to hear your view as well, Swati, or even Dave, right? But just before that, for those participants who have dialed in, please feel free to drop in your questions at the chat box, and we will have our remarkable panelists to take on some of the questions. Just checking now, I think I don't see any questions yet from my screen, but participants, please, this is your moment. We have got remarkable speakers, and good to get their thoughts in this session today. So, yes, Dave.
Maybe just building on that, I think there is a sea change coming on the green space. So, and by that I mean younger people now entering university, and I could speak for the U.S., right? But the popularity of going into those majors, whether it's environmental majors, environmental sciences, or other green technologies amongst both women and men is massive. So I do think that we're going to start to see a change of the people that are entering those industries. I've had a daughter in engineering school now, and that's what she's passionate about. And it seems like all of her friends are passionate about it. So I think we will see a change in terms of people entering the green technology space.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that's so spot on. I mean, my daughter is also, I mean, she's doing her law and she's so interested in the sustainability piece as well, right? And that's a very interesting comment, Dave, because, you know, if we look at all the recent conversations around the great resignation that's happening, you could see that some of the data points does show that all these millennials, one is, of course, they want flexibility, but one of the key reasons perhaps why they're also leaving organization is they want to work for organizations that are passionate about, you know, sustainability.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yep. and aligned with their principles, you know, protection of environment. And so this is huge shift, and it's really needed, right?
Yeah,
we are not millennials. We all agree. I think if we are part of the survey, we will say yes, yes, yes. Right. So, Swati, anything to add in that space in green economy and participation on women, or like what the other panelists say, look, it's not just women, right? Though the survey says the women are feeling less prepared, but what the panelists is saying, hey, you know what? All of us here are on equal footing, right? Swati, any thoughts on that?
So, as you and Dave said, you know, I think the first important aspect is intent, you know, and I think the intent is there, and the intent has really increased over the last 2 years because of the pandemic, you know, because people have realized that this is it and this is the chance for us to turn green. Otherwise, we are really not heading in the right direction. So it has really helped us with the intent. And I think it's on us as organizations, how do we use the intent? So one of the things that has something that we've recently implemented and has helped us is that we have made our sustainability initiatives voluntary, you know, and it really surprised me, but I had more women volunteers wanting to participate in it than our male counterparts, you know. So I think that's the first thing, that, you know, focus on people who have the intent so that we don't have to start from scratch in trying to build the intent. And the second thing is what is required to make the change is the skill set, which I think Daniel and Sam touched upon as well. How do we build the skill set? The only thing that I would add there is that when we are looking to build the skill set, we should look for synergies in our value chain, you know. So like at Philip Morris, we are looking at how can we make our commercial systems more sustainable, you know. So we are ensuring our products are commercially or commercialized responsibly and in a sustainable manner. So if that means that, you know, we are going to have a go green on our electronic product and a recycled product attached to our commercial programs, it helps because then you're really telling people to pick up very small little skills on the side, because they already know the commercialization skills. So what you're adding to it is newer programs around sustainability. And for them, it's a baby step to start picking those skills up, So I think similarly, we are looking at our supply chain, and we are looking at our end products. So it is important for us to identify end-to-end value chains, look within our current value chains, how we can make them sustainable, and then have those baby steps on skill sets that our people can pick up. So these are the two things, intent and skill sets, which are really something that we want to focus on. We just started focusing on, and we are hoping we make progress there.
Thank you very much, Swati. Let me just check the chat box again to see if there are any questions. Priscilla, I don't see any questions. Do you see any at this point, Priscilla? Okay, none. Perhaps the panelists, all your thoughts have been delivered very clearly, and the participants are, having good learnings out of it. So there's no questions yet, but I'm sure if there's any, we will quickly reach out to you separately as well. So we are coming almost to the end of the session, but there are a couple of other one other question that I have perhaps, and we can go around to just chat about this as well. Now, it is useful to note, right, in conjunction with this International Women's Day, or rather week, that we are celebrating in MCHEM. We are doing it, in a week. There are 3 days of events, and there's more that Siobhan and the team are putting through for us as well. One of the things that we notice is many of the organizations and individuals are making commitments in breaking the bias. And that's the theme for this year, right? Breaking the bias. So it'll be quite interesting to hear panelists, your organization's commitment, and perhaps even if you are making some personal commitment yourself, if any, that would be great to hear your point of view. And Anthony, sorry to put you on spot. Perhaps it's good to hear your point of view too. So perhaps we will start with Danielle, yourself. Any commitments from BMW as well as your personal commitment?
Definitely. There are a few things that we are working on here. The first one is about the equitable pay. So it's about closing the gap right now. So, of course, I would say from a historical perspective, there are some indifferences. So what we are now doing is closing that gap. So that's the absolute commitment that we have for the year 2022. Next up would be around language and behaviour. So this is quite an interesting one. And it could be as simple as when we walk into a room and we say, "Hi, guys." Yeah. Should it rather be "Hi, people," "Hi, team," "Hi, colleagues"? Yeah, so it's about the language and the behavior that we look at and that we deliver every single day, and being okay to raise the hand and say, "Hang on a second, is that still really appropriate? Yes or no?" Yeah. So the commitment from the leadership team is to be able to squash that out quite quickly without not even realizing. There are moments when I also walk into a room and I'm coming from Australia, right? So it's quite common to use a bit of slang. So "Hi, guys." But it could be quite offensive, actually, when you think about it from that way, So that's another one I would say. The next one, the last one I have, is about talking and listening to understand a female perspective. We are quite lucky in the sense that we have greater than 50% of our leadership team being female, but that's not the case at all of the next levels down. So what we are very much encouraging is our managers, our other leaders within the organisation, is to not just want to have the opinion of a female and kind of, just talk about it and go, "Okay, great." It's rather to listen and understand, the perspective, to gain the knowledge, the why it comes out this way, or why is the perspective coming from this angle. And this becomes now a discussion in not just the leadership team, but also within, other teams as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Danielle. And I like the piece that you mentioned about the languages, because sometimes we all just say it and then we kind of catch it ourselves, right? which I did as well during the session. I caught myself on one of it. Perhaps you all did not. I was like, oops, okay.
I didn't catch you.
So sometimes it's like, reminding ourselves as well to be very mindful of some of the languages that we use. So that's a brilliant one. Thank you very much, Danielle. Swati, your side, any commitment from Philip Morris as well as yourself?
So I would say that Danielle has covered some of them, but the only additional one that I would add on is, and Sugna, this is something that we have recently discovered. There is bias that's creeping in now because of work from home, So there are a bit of, I would say, assumptions and preferences that might differ from people. So there is that. So I think our personal commitment as Philip Morris Malaysia and my personal commitment as the People and Culture Head this year is to break any bias with respect to work from home. We do not want any kind of discrimination when we are doing meetings. We want to make sure that we are inclusive. We want to make sure that all our meetings are run in a hybrid manner to provide that flexibility to our people to choose the time and place that they want to work from. So that's the only one in addition to what we have from the past, of course, the language barrier being definitely one of them, as well as I said, the career opportunities. We want to be making sure that we are providing that equally to people. But the new one is around work from home.
Yes, and that's a very important one. And a lot of people are also asking, right, does it affect my performance at year end, right? Like if I work from home, is there an impact to my performance rating? So organizations are consciously building into their guidelines and policies that look, everyone is equal in that sense, whether you work from home or office, there's no impact to your performance. All it's focused on driving the outcome and ensuring that the productivity is there. That's a very important one. I sense, despite sometimes organizations do say that they put that in the policies, but people still want that comfort, right? Swati, I'm sure you're seeing that, and managers, and even the role of managers have changed quite dramatically, right? In that sense, and for the right reason. Well-being is a huge part of managers' responsibility these days, right? So managers do have a role to constantly give that assurance to the team members. So that's very important as well, that look, the hybrid working model, it's equal whether you're working from home or in the office. So that's a very interesting and useful piece. So Dave, your side, like to hear what's the commitment of Boston Scientific, and personally, if you also have any commitments.
Yeah, maybe I'll focus on the individual, right? So my I statement is around my interview style, right? So I'm aware of some, I guess there's somewhere between unconscious and conscious biases in terms of how I interview, right? At the end of the day, I'll sit down and it's easy to get comfortable with somebody who talks about the same hobbies as me, stronger English, right? Because I'm not multilingual, et cetera. So personally, I'm really trying to work on being better at eliminating those from the interview process, right? And I've made progress, but I've got a ways to go. So there's an example of personal commitment, and I think Boston Scientific's corporate commitments, very similar to what you're hearing here. We publish everything, right? And again, we then deliver what we're measuring, which is fantastic. And so I think consistent with the other great multinationals on the call here, trying to really comprehensively make progress. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dave. And being in Malaysia gives that great opportunity for learning, right? It's a multi-racial country, and we speak different languages. So it's
exactly.
very exciting learning moments for you too, as much as you're contributing to us in Malaysia, Dave. So I've got Sam, and then we will go on to our chairman of MCHEM to share his commitments. But Sam, over to you first.
Well, I've been fortunate and blessed in the fact that I've worked for a number of women bosses. So I got good coaching in terms at an early stage in my career. So I count myself very fortunate. And when I think in Manpower Group Malaysia, 7 out of 10 of our employees are women. As I mentioned earlier, 5 out of the 8 of the leadership team are women. But I think the key here is not to get smug and comfortable, and to look for ways to further improve. And for me, I think the way I've been mentored and coached in terms of my management journey is to be blind to the gender, the sex, where a person is from, and focus entirely in terms of what do they bring to the community. And for us within Manpower Group, community is very, very important. So we talk an awful lot about our village, our group of people, and I think that's really important in terms of defining the working culture that you have on a day-to-day basis. So Manpower Group, as I say, is a value-based organization, but that doesn't mean anything unless you're actually living that on a day-to-day basis in every place that you work. So this is an area that's been good for us. I've made many mistakes, and I think the key for me is to live by what I've spoken about today, and that's to continuously learn, find ways where we can be even more inclusive, provide more opportunities for development and rewarding women. And again, this is across all aspects of diversity, not just gender. There are multiple areas within diversity in any workforce, and that's something that we want to make sure that we continue to improve and find ways where we can get better and better at it.
Thank you, Sam. And Anthony, over to you.
Sure, I think a lot of good points there. And the other thing is, I mean, for me, is also be brave to make the change, right? So I'm fortunate. I mean, look at AmCham has a great lady CEO. I'm also chair of the General Insurance Association and the Malaysian Insurance Institute, and both of them we have brought in rather a lady CEO in the last couple of years, and really first time for both of those. It's been a fantastic change, and everyone's very happy with it. But it requires obviously hand-holding and being there to ensure they feel secure in what they're doing. And once you get over that initial little again, bias or whatever it is that always exists, everyone moves on. No one's questioning it anymore. So I think it's important that we all do that. And we as, MNC leaders have a great role to play, because, Malaysian society still has a long way to go, right? So we are there to lead the next generation, make them feel comfortable in what they're doing, and they're exposed to, hey, the rest of the world, what are they doing? And that's going to be very powerful. So, I'm very pleased to hear such great responses from everybody, right? So, the collective's very powerful. I always believe that. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. So looks like we have covered the commitment from all the panelists. And I personally commit that I will only moderate sessions if there's at least one or more women. So I must say that when AmCham reached out, I did look at the name list and I said, okay, though I did clarify some names like, okay, I say, yes, I'm up for it. So that's the personal commitment, that I'm making as well. So, well, with that, we are coming to the end of the session. We have got another 2 minutes. I must say, panelists, you have been amazing in the session today. Thank you very much for sharing all your views, your observation, your thought thinking process. I really say that there was just so much of learning. I'm sure for the participants, for me personally, it has been remarkable. Thank you very much. And then to AmCham, Siobhan and the team, thank you very much for putting this event together. This is the 3rd day, and I'm sure there's many more follow-ups that Siobhan and the team will be doing. Thank you for that. And to the wonderful participants, thank you very much for joining us for this session. I just like to end the session with a little imagination here, right? So break the bias. Imagine a world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination. A world that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive. a world where difference is valued and celebrated. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. And I welcome the panelists and Anthony for us to show a gesture of break the bias for a photo op.